Welcome to the Public Domain of Texas lecture. In this lecture, we're going to talk about all the different ways that Texas citizens acquired property. That could be under Spanish, Mexican, republic, or state government. But the basic idea is that the sovereign is transferring property to private parties. So the Republic of Texas transfers 1,000 acres to John Smith. Now, I would be remiss in not telling you that the history of Texas land ownership and the public domain of Texas are really kind of like kissing cousins. They're very related, they're intertwined, and to appreciate the need to know information, the public domain lecture is great. But if you'd like some context and to understand why certain things are going on, then you're going to have to watch the history of Texas to get a good idea of what's happening. So appreciate that the public domain and the Texas history go together. Once upon a time, the North American continent was terra incognita, and that includes the United States as we know it today. But it's really important to understand that before the European colonial powers appeared, our country was really just connected with Central America and Canada, and there was no United States as we see it today. Many Indian tribes lived, worked, and played in the states we know as Texas and New Mexico and other states around us. And these people really didn't know Texas because Texas did not yet exist. Hard to believe, but it was quite a long time ago. Over the coming decades and centuries, the United States started off as this pink color in the far right and slowly expanded through the Gadsden Purchase, Louisiana Purchase, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Oregon Territories, and other things like that. But it happened over time, happened slowly. And Hawaii and Alaska are really pretty new states to the U.S. Additionally, take a look at what Texas appears as. The yellow Texas that you see in this picture is not the Texas you know today. In fact, it covers states such as Oklahoma, Colorado, and New Mexico. So even the shapes of the states are different today than they were, 200 years ago, which is pretty cool. And how did this happen? By sovereigns. A sovereign is a nation or government state. And what sovereigns played a role in North America? Britain, France, Spain. Even smaller countries like the Dutch and others in South America, but really North America, we've got the French, the Spanish, and the English. And let me tell you, they were not good friends. Not good friends at all. In fact, this was outright war in some cases, where the British fought the French in the French and Indian War, and the United States invaded Mexico, and the United States invaded Spain, and the United States invaded Cuba. So we know all these places, and it's always a power struggle between these different governments. In this lesson, we'll talk about how land was conveyed from different governments to private parties, and how pretty much every part of Texas today is under private ownership, which is hard to believe, but, Texas in various governments conveyed tens and tens of millions of acres of land, so they burned off a lot of property. The basic process of conveying a property from a sovereign to an individual is simply using a land patent. A land patent is nothing more than a conveyance. I Republic of Texas, hereby convey Blackacre to Tony Nettleman. But now, what's the difference between a patent and a deed? A deed is from private party to private party, and a patent is from sovereign to private party. There are several intermediate steps before a patent is issued for a piece of property, but basically that's all you need. As long as you have the land patent, you have title to this property. Now here is a very, very important point. Write this down. When you see a survey from Texas to a private party, the date of survey controls, not the date of certificate and not the date of patent. When you're comparing junior-senior rights, the date of survey controls. And that's because we say that the land was split off from the sovereign and given to the private party when the survey was conducted. That is going to be an analytical issue if there is ever one. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to a place called Six Flags, an amusement park, most of my adolescent life. And I never realized what Six Flags meant. And obviously, Six Flags is a Texas theme park, and it refers to the Six Flags of Texas. That is, Spain, France, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, the Confederacy, and the state of Texas under the United States. Well, all Six Flags of Texas conveyed property. That's a lie. Only 5 did. Remember, Spain, France, Mexico, Republic, Confederacy, state of Texas. The only sovereign that did not issue land patents was the French. And the French did not issue any property to private individuals. But the other sovereigns did. And we have to appreciate what kind of documents, what kind of conveyances, what kind of processes were used to issue these patents. Because remember that once Spain was overthrown, Mexico ran Texas. But Mexico retroactively adopted the validity of Spanish land grants. So if you were a Spaniard living in what is now Mexico, the Republic of Mexico would honor your land grant. Same thing for the Republic and the state of Texas. The Republic had 1,000 different things to do in order to make a land patent valid. But if you could prove that you were issued a land grant in Spain or Mexico, then the state of Texas or the Republic of Texas would honor that grant. So that's pretty fair. What does that mean for the present-day surveyor? That means we have to be knowledgeable of Spanish, Mexican, Confederate, Republic, and state of Texas land grant systems in order to determine the boundaries and title ownership of a property. Every land grant system under the different sovereigns had unique characteristics. The land grant system, called preemption, was upbeat, artistic, interesting, outgoing, and supportive. What a fantastic person this preemption grant was. No, not really. But you do have to know the actual parameters of the land grant system. And those are when the land grant began and ended, the intended recipient, the purpose of the program, size of land conveyed, special requirements, and restrictions on sale. How about an example of that? Well, we'll come to that very shortly, but keep this list of criteria handy because we want to talk about the different systems under Mexico, the Republic, state of Texas, and you need to know who got the property. Was it the head of household? Was it a military veteran? Also, another special program is the donation grants. If you fought in a battle, say the Battle of San Jacinto, and you were one of the 7 Texans who survived that battle, the legislature gave you several hundred acres of property. Pretty cool. But there are certain requirements you had to meet. So we'll talk about that, but just be aware that you need to be able to answer these questions for every land grant program offered in Texas history. Fantastic multiple choice questions. As I mentioned earlier, the land grants that were created by the overthrown governments were accepted by the new sovereigns. And that's because you really can't have a land system where you take the land away from one group and give it to another, even though that first group paid good money for that property under a former government. Example, the Republic of Texas overthrew Mexico and established a democratic form of government, in contradistinction to Santa Anna and his dictatorship. Really, really bad guy. But some people, in fact, quite a few, including Moses and Stephen F. Austin, set up colonies of Anglos in present-day Republic, past-day Mexico, or Tejas y Chihuahua. Well, are we going to kick Stephen Austin off his property? Heck no. He's one of the founders of this Republican movement. So if you got property under Mexican or Spanish rule, then the Republic of Texas did not kick you off your property. In fact, there was a ton of fraud when it came to prove who owned what, but that's a question for the history books and for your own personal edification, because it will not be an exam subject. And let's focus on the remainder of this video on these 8 basic terms: certificate, title, patent, impresario, headright, scrip, bounty, and donation. And flashcards are a fantastic way to learn the definitions of these terms. To begin with, we had the French land grants. And this is a very easy subject to learn because there were no French land grants. La Salle showed up on his boat that was crashed in Matagorda Bay. He set up a colony. The colony did not last very long. It was near present-day Victoria, Texas, and there were no individual plots owned by citizens. Very interesting subject. Highly encourage you to go to the Texas State Museum in Austin, and also encourage you to listen to the Texas History Lecture. But in this lecture, we are not going to spend very much time on France, because France did not convey any land from the sovereign to private parties. Flag number 2, Spain. Spain, they issued some land grants, but not very much. Not nearly as much as other sovereigns. What's important to appreciate is that the state of Texas and North America in general, like Florida, it was not owned by the country of Spain. It was actually owned by the Spanish king himself. So the New World, as found by Christopher Columbus, was given to the crown, the King of Spain, as a gift. It's pretty cool to have your own country. But anyways, the King of Spain went ahead and he issued land grants. But he only issued land grants, also known sometimes as rancheros, to his friends, to his loyal subjects, to the people who supported him and paid him and contributed money to his re-election campaign. And this is because there really was only 2 main purposes for land use in the New World. The first purpose was to establish religion. Spain is a Catholic nation, and a primary purpose of this exploration was to provide religion and convert these poor heathens to the Catholic religion. So the King of Spain gave a lot of property to monasteries and outposts, and they built these really beautiful churches and monasteries, other things, and they used those buildings to convert our poor Indians. And if you want to see an interesting thing, I know this isn't the history lesson, but go to Goliad and go to the monastery in Goliad and see the subjugation and the slavery that the church put the Indians under. It was really, really bad. But anyways, number one, religion, and number two, grazing. You want to become a farmer or you want to graze big cattle, Texas is a fantastic place to do that. Now, you're going to need a lot of property, but the King of Spain has got it. So the king would grant, thousands or tens of thousands of acres of property to these loyal subjects. They would come over here, they would found their farm or their cattle ranch, and really only about 150 land grants were issued in the entire time of Spanish rule. 150, so very, very little. 150 land grants in about 60 years. Now let's fast forward to Mexican land grants. The Mexican land grants were more prevalent, and that's because, well, we'll come to that in a few minutes, but it's really because of threats. Mexico was a very poor nation who had just overthrown the Spaniards after 11 years of revolution, and the Mexicans were basically outnumbered. There was a ton of Indians on Tejas y Chihuahua. There was Anglos coming in from the United States. We've got the French in the Louisiana area, and it's really not a very nice place to be right now. It's very dangerous. The Mexicans had this idea, and they said, well, we are going to create this thing called an impresario. And really, impresarios existed in California and the old world before, so it's not a new idea. But the impresario is a land agent. He is a free agent. And the impresario is a salesman and kind of a land speculator. He goes out, he finds a group of people, he brings the people to the New World, brings them over to Texas, and then he goes ahead, surveys it, lays out the property, and is issued money and land in exchange. How did this happen? It happened through the Colonization Act of 1820 to 1825. And some of the most famous surveyors and some of the most famous people in Texas, like Austin, Burnett, and DeWitt, were impresarios, either for Mexico or the Republic of Texas. On January 17th, 1821, we had the first major Impresario Act. And this was the idea that we are going to import Anglos into Tejas. And the reason why we're doing that is because these Anglos are going to swear their allegiance to the country of Mexico. And they are going to become Mexican citizens. These are loyal subjects, loyal people. And these loyal subjects are going to farm and graze and love the land, and they're going to protect the land from all these darn Indians and the French and those darn Americans. That did not work out as well as Mexico would have hoped because these lovingly Mexican Anglos caused a revolution in the coming years, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The first Land Act, January 17th, 1821, was the Land Act that permitted Moses Austin to settle 300 families in Texas. That is the full extent of the Land Act. Fast forward to the Act of March 24th, 1825, and this colonization law expanded the same idea of Moses Austin's settlement and allowed other settlers to come in. And these settlers, if they were heads of household, they would get about 4,600 acres of land. And their job was to settle the land and protect it from people like the Indians and the French. After about 5 years of settlement, the Mexican government got scared. And the Mexican government got scared of white settlers, Anglos. Why is that? It's because these Anglos, even though they immigrated from the U.S. and gave up their U.S. citizenship, they're now Mexican citizens, they are still loyal subjects of Abe Lincoln. So even though they renounced their citizenship, they still loved and considered themselves Americans. So now the Mexican government has a whole bunch of U.S. Anglos in Mexico. So the Mexicans went ahead and cut off all Anglo land settlements as of April 6th, 1830. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Before moving on to our republic, remind me, what is an impresario? What land act brought Moses Austin / Stephen Austin to Texas? And finally, who were the three famous land surveyors, impresarios of Mexico? If you can answer those three things, you are ready to keep moving.